I'm really happy here with Dr. Richman. We started years ago. How many years ago?
I think our last radio show, you mean just you and I knowing each other?
We
Oh, 20.
At least 20 years, yeah. And it was one of those things where have you been? Just instantaneous.
Yeah.
And it's been a joy because we shared a radio program for many years on KNRY. And it was a spontaneous show. There was nothing planned there at all. We were just
like today.
Like today. We would just start with a few moments of silence, and what came out, came out. That's it. And the program was about an hour long, but this program won't be an hour long. We chose the topic of prodigal son, not because we want to bore you with the same thing all the time, but because it's a very powerful cosmic story. And you know, the oldest kind of spiritual teaching is stories. That's it. People would tell stories passed from generation to generation, way before there was anything written. In certain Native American tribes, the storyteller is considered one of the highest beings in the tribe because she or he is the holder of the truth and the expression of the truth. So we're looking at a cosmic story today. And I think our usual way of starting is to do some silence, and then we'll see what happens.
It'll be a surprise to us as well.
Yeah. So let's just go inside for a few moments. The breath is our eternal companion. If we become conscious of it, breathe deeply, it stops on the inside, right about the heart level, and goes back out. Stops on the outside, about the heart level also. Let's just breathe for a few moments. Those two stopping places are very special. They're called the portals. Because in those stopping places, as short as they are, we get filled with something. It's our life force. And it's that life force that governs this talk today, this presentation. It moves through the speakers, it moves through the audience, it moves through all of us. Creates understanding and light, freedom. So what is said is perfect, what is heard is perfect, what is realized is practical, usable, and perfect. And so it is.
You know, Bill, I was thinking that it's so appropriate to do this, not only because we're going to bring a lot more depth to it, but when you think about that this congregation is now the center for spiritual awareness, the prodigal son is really a story of beginning one's own spiritual awareness and journey in terms of the way it shows up.
I think it's also a story of continuing it. Because what I like to do with this story is take it out of the context of space and time. I think if you keep it in that context, you miss the story. So one of the things I'd like to do is explore a whole different concept of time and space. And
I'll follow you.
Yeah, it sounds good. Most people look at this story from the point of view of, okay, so he was at the father's house, then he went off like all teenagers do, had reckless living, enjoyed himself terribly, far too much, came to be wanted. That's linear time. Okay, linear time is this happened, then this happens, and this happens after this one, and so forth. That's called linear time. And if you look at it that way, you miss one of the primary messages, and that is that this is a cosmic story. It's not just about a person at a certain time, or even about us at a certain time, because it certainly fits most of us. I mean, did anyone leave their family and go off and riotous living? Oh, come on. Of course you did. All right. So it seems to fit us, but all of that's too linear. This story is about cycles, because the universe, the cosmos, is cyclic. Everything that happens, as much as we try to have linear time, look at the watches. They go around in circles. Right? The year goes around in circles. Every day repeats itself. We're in the midst of cycles. So this story is meant to be cyclic. In other words, it's not a one-time thing. It's not an historical event. It's something that wishes to repeat again and again. And we'll get to that as we go on. That's important to grasp the story.
What I like about that is that, again, it's the beginning of when you're moving out into mindlessness, where you don't have a sense of self. And when yourself, as in symbolized in the far country, is that beginning of thinking that recognition and who we are and how we are and what will gratify us is outside, not inside. That it's all about seeking. The riotous living is the tags and the symbols and the identifiers and the sense of self from another context. That we go outside self to find self. Mm-hmm. And that there is such a sense of loss that comes with that. Yeah. And pain that we don't realize because we hide that. And actually in August when Miranda McPherson was here, she spoke to that in terms of dropping back in, which we'll deal with later. But that sense of being outside, not dealing with that inner sense of loss and pain, but moving so hard and fast to find self somewhere else, which is really a way of denying and dampening that pain that really hungers and longs for more and connection.
And that pain that longs for more and connection is actually planned right into the story. It's quite amazing. Because, just look at the setup here. Suppose you were a dramatist, don't be religious about this. Okay? You're just looking at the drama of the story. You've got the father's house, obviously it's quite nice. Everyone's supported, everyone's happy, and so forth and so on. But eventually the kid gets to be a teenager. Out he goes. Evidently, there were people there, such as a brother, that you only really hear about later, at the very end. And there were events which are very supportive, very rich, very wonderful there, because his father was very wealthy. Okay, this is the outer story. What does that imply? It implies that when he left to go into, quote, the far country, he left a lot. He left a lot behind. He left a very wealthy inheritance. He took a little bit with him, but not much. Very wealthy inheritance was left behind, and even relationships were left behind. Now these relationships are symbolic, and they have to be understood metaphorically. We'll go into that too. But he had to leave to go to the far country, which is a separation from something that was already existing and wonderful. Therefore, there's going to be a sense of loss.
And for me, it spins a little differently. For me, it is, again, like in Western society, we're brought up with such an outside sense, like Siddhartha before he became Buddha, brought up in the castle with all of his needs met and all of his whims attended to, and a sense of always living in joy, which was more, again, about an external sense of being given to. Even leaving the home where his father had all this wealth was, again, for me, validating that it's outside. It's what I give you, it's what you get, it's what is. And again, he went outside to go get, and I like to bring up the brother because I think there's a whole new spin we can put to that. But I think, again, we're taught so much in this Western world to be outside. So that when we think of having more or gaining more of self, we just continue that outside again. And what he left was not really what he wanted to come back to, and I think where his father met him. But he really left that sense again of stuff, and seeking more stuff, and lost always, as we all are, being, if we're not brought up in a home, which most of us weren't, where there was a sense of inner direction, feeling, and mindfulness.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, exactly. And this is the dramatic setup as far as I'm concerned, because he's basically attracted to the far country, which I think most of us realize is the mind and its connection to the senses and things like that. He's attracted to that. But undoubtedly there's a sense of I'm not complete. Does anyone ever have that sense of I'm not complete? Look at this. Yeah, okay. Someone put it one time, they said, something wonderful was supposed to happen, but it hasn't yet. Okay, there's some heads going up and down. This is built into the drama. Why? Because he left part of himself behind. And this is absolutely at the core of the drama. When we come into this world, we don't have completeness unless we're an avatar or something like that. Very rarely there are complete people who come to the world.
No.
So we lose something. And we always have that sense of, am I going to find this? You know, I get married, well, fourth time, let's see if I can do this. And so forth and so on. But that inner yearning, that emptiness, this is really, you know, it shows up as inadequacy, it shows up as unworthiness, it shows up as strange things that happen in jobs. We do our best, but it doesn't work. And, you know, all these kinds of events which point to I'm not whole, something's wrong, something's lacking. And this is dramatically built into it. It's supposed to happen. Why? Because when that gets strong enough, you start thinking about home. And it took quite a while for it to get strong enough. Huh? Yeah. He spent a lot of time in the far country. Most of us are pretty stubborn.
And worse than that, we're sure that is the direction. Because what you're saying is there is always this pain and this sense of longing, like I'm on the cusp of something showing up. But where we focus it, because we were brought up to believe that, is we focus outside. If I just had this place to live, or this person in my life, or this job, or this promotion, or people actually got me, and it's still outside. And the far country is such a sense of ego, and that we're still moving and wondering and prophesizing, where is it going to come from outside? And we get locked into that and we don't think that anything could be different. And what that does, because there's this inner sense of longing and need to connect, but when we keep moving outside, we just get emptier and emptier and emptier. And to me, that's a symbolism of being so debilitated and decompensated to a point where he's eating with the swine, because he just keeps getting empty. And what happens, as many of you know, as you're spiritualists here, and this is part of what we do, there came a point when you hit a wall, and people will come in to do work with me, and they'll go, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep banging my head into that wall and feeling so empty. And it's not even about stubborn, it is certainly that, but you keep banging that wall because you're so sure that's the answer. And my chair is right in front of a wall, and I kind of put my hand back to this wall, and I go, wall. And I go, only door is over there. And it's like they go, oh. But we don't have a sense. We think we're supposed to plow through the wall. And as you know, if you keep hitting a wall, you get broken. You finally hit a place of brokenness, because that deeper sense, it just gets emptier and emptier, which is a sense of longing.
I think part of it, maybe you'd like to comment on this, is part of it is that wall is made by us. And therefore, it's difficult to break through because we made it. We made the limitation. We conceived of ourselves in a small way, contracted way. Or we conceived of others as being much more powerful than us. And, you know, we devise these challenges to overcome, and when we can't overcome them.
And that's a good point. What happens is, I think we continue them. I think we're brought up because all of you who have raised children or been around children, you know that children hold this sense of need, connection, and emptiness. And what do they do about it? They do this. Pick me up, hold me, connect with me. And when you get those messages of, no, that's not the deal. The deal is, how do you perform this way, or how have you behaved, or how have you shown up, or how have you represented our family, or how have you, shown that you need to take care of me, the adult. And as you start being told that as a belief, because you talk about beliefs a lot in terms of dispelling them, it is that sense we hold on to that belief as being us. And it's not us. And we carry it. And therefore we've developed all these ways of spinning, seeking the far country, working really hard, wanting to prove ourselves, get accepted, be liked, be valued. And we just keep carrying that because no one has said, here, it's here.
Sort of borrowed beliefs, huh?
And adapted beliefs is that's who I am.
Yeah.
And we continue that until we fall
And
into...
it's not who we are. That's the problem.
At
It's
all.
not who we are at all. So it seems to me that a great deal of the story is about him being out there, but you don't get the details.
Right.
It jumps to the end, and at the end, something very interesting happens. He's devastated. He has nothing to eat. He has no more inheritance. You can interpret that how you will. It's not necessarily financial inheritance. It could well be emotional inheritance. His emotions are distraught. He's at the low point. And what does he do? He attaches himself to a citizen of the far country. Okay, has anyone done that? Has anyone followed a person out here and, in a very devoted way and believed exactly what they were told and on, only to find out that things got worse? Because that's not what the purpose of the story is. It's not about attaching to a citizen of the far country. It's about discovering yourself. Now, there are people who will, today, we're very fortunate because we have many people who, just hold up a mirror and say, look at yourself. Look at who you are. Find yourself. But that isn't common. Now, there are a lot of citizens out there that don't do that. But the purpose of the story is, no one likes this part of it. You just got to, hold on to the seat for a minute. The purpose of the story is for things to get so bad that you'll wake up to your own being, your own presence, your own aliveness. And we can't wake up until they get bad. It's, just a cold here and there is not going to do it. Maybe a business failure. No, we can recover from that. The ego is persistent, it's arrogant, it's strong, it's stubborn. And to crack that to the point where we say, okay, there's a memory. Wait a minute, I remember something. I remember something subtle. And this is a Christian story. By the way, it's also Buddhist, almost word for word. In one of the Buddhist scriptures, you find the same story. But if you go into the Hindu philosophy, they say something very interesting that really applies here. They say that the divine energy awakens in every human being in the adolescent years. Where does it come? It comes as an experience of maybe a vision. My mother told me that one time when she was a teenager, she woke up in the middle of the night, there was Jesus at the foot of the bed. She never forgot that her whole life. Sometimes it comes as what we call a lump in the throat, and you get up and you talk to your parents and you say, why does this, why can't I swallow very well? And, they have some, stuff about growing pains or whatever. They give you this line, and the next day it's gone and so forth. That's the opening of a divine center. But no one in our culture knows about it. So we don't communicate that. So the Hindus say in every person there is some kind of experience in adolescence where you direct contact with your being. He had to get so low on the totem pole that he remembered that ancient memory came back to him. He called it the Father's house. He remembered the Father's house. He remembered an experience that was extraordinary, was transcendent, was beautiful, was rich, was magnificent. So it means something literally, not just figuratively.
Yeah, and we all experience that. I mean, how many of you have done something where, whether it was a relationship or a judgment or a sense of moving in a certain direction, and you went like, boy, I really learned from that, I don't want to do that again. And then you do it again. And you go, oh my God, I can't believe I did that again. And it's about, like I used to say in my 20s and 30s that every 3 to 5 years you had this wake-up call that you could either pay attention to or not. And you all kind of know what that is. And the first probably 1 or 2, you don't pay attention. And what I say to the people I work with is, if you don't pay attention to that kind of situation, the next time it shows up, the universe will hit you with a bigger stick.
Yeah.
And it does. It gets to be a 2x4. And we're so in those moments of having that epiphany, we keep looking outside very early on to what you were saying. We look for mentors that guide us more into the far country and therefore keep losing ourselves. And at some point, as you're saying, there is in all of us, as we all know, we are all souls having a human experience. And there is always that availability to be tugged on to realize you are deeper than that personality you think you are. And as we start to do that, we start to get glimpses of I'm more. And the sense of I'm more doesn't come from having more. It starts to drop into that place. And there's a great deal of sadness and some depression, because it's like, oh my God, I didn't realize how lost I've been. And starting to drop more into that sense of lostness and wanting to deeply connect and wanting more from the heart. And that's what starts to drop, I believe. You start to drop in and remember, oh, I am more than this. And we call it this existential crisis we all drop into somewhere between 18 and 70. You know? Depends how hard you get hit with that board. You know, and how stubborn you are that it's got to be this way. You know, because that brings up the vernacular we know about. Surrendering, letting go, letting God. Stepping up to asking for help. Not seeking help in the same way we've always been taught to seek it. And dropping into a sense of Father and a sense of deeper. And I'm so wanting to connect, but I have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
And you drop into that lostness, which is where you must go first.
Yeah.
And it hurts.
I think some of us are late bloomers. Anyone? We didn't get it at 18 or... But nevertheless, as you say, the message keeps coming. I believe this message comes so something, and I'm going to use the word and go back and redefine it. It's surrender, that we learn how to surrender. Now, please, this is not surrendering to conditions, okay? This is not surrendering to outer situations, what other people tell us, and so it has nothing to do with that. It's exactly the opposite. It's a surrender to your own being. Well, in order to surrender to your own being, first of all, you have to have some sense that it exists. Right? If you don't, how can you surrender to it? And then you have to trust it. In other words, is it safe? Because we surrendered to a lot of citizens in the far country, it hasn't been safe. Yeah. So we distrust the whole process of surrender. We watch too many John Wayne movies. Surrender, well. It's not like that. It's a surrender to the essence of your own life force, the thing that caused you to be to begin with. It's still with us. Okay, now that takes a while. That's not an overnight thing. You notice he had no clue what to do. He was lost. He tried to go home. Didn't work, couldn't find his way. And he said 3 times, I will arise and go to my father's house and ask to become as a servant in my father's house. 3 times means, number one, it was hard because he had to repeat it 3 times. He still couldn't get an idea how to do this. It also means pay a lot of attention. Because when the ancients wrote something down 3 times, they mean pay attention. Translate that one, figure out what it means. I will rise and go to my Father's house. The image of the Father is not exclusive to Christianity, but it is well worked out in what we know of the Christian writings. Because Jesus himself used that image. You know, he talked about his own path. And actually, all he did was very similar to the Buddha in many ways. He just shared his own path, that's all, which was very contradictory in terms of the standard Judaism that was around at the time. So it shocked people. But he talked about his own experience. He says, I have a Father within. And then he said, it's here, in the heart. You know, the Father's place is in the heart. I think he chose the metaphor of father because that was safe for him. And that meant a familial relationship, it meant warmth, it meant love. You know, that sense of wisdom, love, embracement, you know, all of this is contained in that family relationship. And therefore, he was trying to communicate to people that there's something in your heart that, while it is being you, it is wiser than you. And it loves you. It only wants to care for you. It wishes to give you everything, absolutely everything. And for him, that was the Father. What's going on there? Surrender. Picture? By the way, we had an interesting experience because Colleen and I were looking at this, and the ministers gave me a beautiful print of a Rembrandt painting of the prodigal son, where there's the father, the son, and maybe a couple people. It's very dark. It's hard to see what's going on in the painting, so it wasn't appropriate for him. So we went online and found this picture where you can see they're embracing. There's even emotion in the picture. It's very beautifully done. And guess who painted it? Rembrandt. He did several paintings, so there it is. It's a surrender process, and the painting, that particular one, really conveys it. You know, who is he surrendering to? That which fathered him, that which sired him. Now, you say, well, physical person. No, that's not it. It is, I think Ernest Holmes would put it this way, it's a cosmic mind. It's an infinite mind. It's a divine intelligence. It's a perfect understanding. It's a pure love. You know? And out of that, it projects us as humans who have senses and therefore are contracted in our mind. Our mind can't be infinite because we have sensory input that's not infinite. All right, so our little minds, our human minds, what you would call ego, the ego mind has to come into a surrender mode to the cosmic mind that caused it to be and knows exactly how to heal it, transform it, renew it, rejuvenate it, and so forth. That Rembrandt captured in one painting, or several paintings. So this is a surrender story, there's no doubt about it. It's the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell is right. You find it in many stories, even popular stories. But the bottom line is, what does it take for you as a human being to surrender to your own being, your own business, your aliveness? That's the crucial thing.
And I think I like what you're saying, that we actually come back to our own divinity. So I'm going to stay with that and back up a little, is that we start to get tugs of our own divinity. And what the ego does is you start to go, wait a minute, there's a home I need to come back to, self, into my own divinity. And the ego goes, oh, no, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't work. Where are you going to do it? You're going to walk out there, you don't know where you're going, and you're going to leave these mentors who are all around helping you to own things and have things. And that's why it's like you said in Buddhism, it's about threes. Don't we say third time's the charm? It's even woven into our culture. And so it's a trial and error of learning to trust what we can't have any understanding of trusting. Because the mind goes, no, absolutely not. That's intangible. It doesn't make any sense. You've had these debates with yourself where your mind just gets on you for having the audacity to be intuitive and go with your higher self. So it's a trial and error, and we have to learn to trust the intangible, which of course makes no sense. And so we have to do that. But for me, the path back to the divinity is what is called faith. Because you have to have faith in the intangible. You have to surrender the ego mind, surrender the intellect. Everything that everyone's told you is going to get you through life and help you survive. Strategize. Don't just sit there. And let all that go. And you have to have faith that there's more, and that the more is here. And so he starts to go out on his path, not knowing where to go. He's completely lost. He's devastated. He's hungry. He's lost. And he keeps going out of faith. And faith is not knowing. Faith is having faith in something more. And we have to let go of our heads. And as you said, surrender to this place of faith that moves us. And we have to have faith that something there that's so hungry and hurts. It really hurts. I say to my patients, I go, it hurts. I'm not kidding. We're not talking euphemisms here. It really hurts because the longing and the angst to be as that picture depicts, held and embraced. And I'd like to actually think that his father surrenders to something bigger because he's felt so lost from his son. That when the son, out of faith and surrender, the higher self leads him, as it will, to that place where his father comes out to get him and embraces him. He doesn't offer him, initially a lot of stuff. He offers him himself, coming back to self. Yeah, I know.
It's a good tale, isn't it?
It's why I like it. It's so much to this.
In the old days, we used to use a phrase about being at the end of your rope. You've heard that, right? Anyone ever been at the end of the rope? Did something show up?
Exactly.
Yeah, or else you wouldn't be here, right? Okay, so the answer is yes. It's always yes. But very often, you have to get to the end of the rope. Why? Because that's the only place where faith can really occur. If there's still a possibility that it can be done by that person over there, or a new way of thinking, then, no, you won't quite surrender.
And the reason being is because when you're at the end of the rope, you go, okay, I give up.
Yeah.
You let go of the intellect. And your higher self in faith says, we've been waiting. Come this way.
Hard nut to crack.
And something kind of does that. It kind of grabs you and moves you. And it moves you in another place. And you go, okay, and something does. You're right. It shows up.
It shows up. Yeah. Isn't it interesting how human this story is and how divine it is? Yeah. Therefore, it has cosmic intonations to it,
Oh my God, it's actually relevant.
It's actually relevant. Yeah. And, you've got a person telling a story here that he lived through. He lived through it. He knows it from the inside out. And this is why he told it. Then he said something interesting. Now, this is not in the story itself. But he said there are two commandments. One is to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and strength. And the other is similar, to love thy fellow man as thyself. In other words, he says all of this depends on love. This is a love relationship. How do you get back? You get back because the Father loves you so much that he comes out and gets you because you can't get back. And then embraces you and calls for a robe. A robe is a sign of wealth. It's a sign of protection. It's a sign of many things. In other words, this is a love affair with your own life. This is the core of the whole thing. This is not something strange. You don't have to contact someone else or read some strange philosophy. It's not about that. It's about the heart relating to shall we say, an unconditional heart. A heart that is so full of love that it doesn't care what you've just been through. It doesn't care what weird things you did in the far country. It doesn't refer to them at all. It says, I love you totally. You are my son who was dead and is now alive. I mean, can you imagine something inside you that will just embrace you completely with all your problems and limitations and memories and whatever, and just take you home, scoop you up and take you home? So faith, yes. I think courage, absolutely.
Yes.
And I also think that a sense of being willing to be loved as you are is really important. And how do you do that? You choose to do that. You choose to say, all right, I've done the best I can, I've made mistakes, that's the way it is, I'm human, and I'm totally loved.
And one of the things in Chopra's 7 Spiritual Laws of Success that speaks to that is, I think he said something like, try and go a half a minute without a judgment. and the deal is to let go of self-judgment. Because as he gets to a place of being at his core, it's about his soul. And our soul is not about our personality. And so it's just wanting to be loved. And for me, it's actually important that the Father does come out, because it could be symbolic that it's about embracing self. But I also believe, as we know from the readings we've done, that when the student is ready, the teacher shows up. And the teacher, I believe, has to meet him with that heart, to really validate that the loneliness and emptiness I feel and I want more of can actually be met. And the Father, I think, is overjoyed as well that they meet each other in that heart.
Oh, yes.
And that it's glowing, and huge. And the Father wants to celebrate the joy of reconnection. Not so much that his son's going to be doing this, or, oh good, the heir apparent's back to take over the business. It's like that he's actually back. And I actually think I'd like to bring in, if you don't mind, the other son. Because I think he gets left out of the fact that in Western society we deal with so many all or nothings. One son, out of his own need to find self, went into the far country. The other son stayed, hoping, hence his huge disappointment and almost sense of betrayal, that the Father wasn't seeing him in all the time that he was there. And he too was still in ego of wanting to be enough and valued. Because the Father hadn't gotten to that place of really being in need and longing to approach the Father with that same kind of heart, even though they were in the same home.
I'm glad you brought that up, because to me this is not handled well by the seminarians and all that. They don't deal with the stay-at-home son very well.
Ooh, that just went out on the World Wide Web.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
We're done now.
Yeah. To me, the stay-at-home son, I mean, if you just stick to the story and don't embroider it, the prodigal may not have even known that brother, because he may have been born later. We just don't know. That's not in the story. But certainly, he hasn't seen him in a long, long time. Right? So he doesn't know this brother. Or it may well be that that brother is part of what was left behind at the beginning, so that the prodigal could come into this far country of the mind and have a worldly experience. But that part was not allowed into the mind. So it stayed home. And the Father said, "You're always with me, and all that I have is yours. You could have asked for a party at any time." But you see, the stay-at-home son didn't ask for the party. Why? Because he had never gone into the far country. Something's to be gained from the far country, and it's more than it seems. And the stay-at-home did not gain that sense of, maybe I should ask for some help. Maybe I should ask for something uplifting, because he was at home. So he didn't get the contrast of the far country and the Father's house. But now this is really strange. It's off the wall, but just stay with it for a minute. What if the prodigal and the stay-at-home son are the same? They're the same person. Well, that's interesting then. Okay. So what is he doing by going home? Well, not only is he discovering the love of his own life force, but he's discovering a part of himself that was missing and has been missing for all these years. You all had your hands up a few moments ago about that part that's missing, right? It's still there. It's still there. And frankly, I think, Gary, that in your language would be the free child. The child that is different from the adapted child. The child that is absolutely free.
The one who stayed at home.
The one who stayed at home.
I could see that, but I like your sense of what if they're the yin and yang of the same person? And the deal is that they're both aspects of feeling empty and disconnected from self, because the brother is still hurt that the Father didn't offer that recognition. So I'd like to propose that actually the son who stayed home was in his own far country, of separated from a Father that he wanted so much in his longing and emptiness to embrace.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, it's not as much a tangible story, but symbolic. It doesn't matter whether we're lost hundreds of miles from home or sitting in the structure called home. if we don't have that sense of deep connection, then there's a sense of lostness. It's actually what you and I felt when we first met. When I was just coming to the peninsula and getting known and kind of meeting people, I just came to your office and we met and we talked for an hour, and there's such a depth. I don't know if you remember, but it was like 30, 40 minutes, and we ended up hugging. And weeks later, I was giving a talk here. I mean, it was like you and I had that depth, and it just kept growing to the radio show, to this.
Yeah.
It's that, and I'd like to propose that both aspects of yin yang of this struggle
Absolutely.
was again the sense of emptiness and lost,
Emptiness
and wanting to find home. And the father, in a literal sense, still missed it with the son, because he said, I could throw a party for you anytime. He missed the longing. And how many of us feel with people that we're connected to, there's sometimes a missing of longing. Because baby boomers didn't grow up with that. Our parents didn't know any of that. And that sense of wanting to deeply connect, no matter where we are, that's really both of their desires and end. And actually, the one who stayed home was very aware, because he got hurt that the son was robed, the other son was robed, and still wanting that. I'm hurt and lonely and want so much more to connect.
Yeah. So it seems as though the return, which is described as, calling for celebration and things like that, very happy, uplifting, that return is a return on many levels. It is a return to what you might call a divine presence, which is transpersonal, which is transcendent, which is filled with richness and unconditional love. But it's also a return psychologically to a part of yourself that you've been missing for a long time. And, if you find a long lost brother or sister or some kind of relative, and you have this kind of union effect going on, it's wonderful. So, the story, while it has its dark moments, I think has a great deal of light to it at the end. Probably light that's far more than we know. This, to me, I've got to speak up here.
We can't go on forever.
Okay,
We
can't
could.
go on. I think one of the most important points is to go back to the beginning and realize that the story is cyclic. It's not meant to be linear. Meaning that why not do this every day? In other words, you say, well, do I have to wait till I almost die the moment before I die? No, of course not. That's too linear. You could, but that's really a hard way to do it. How about every day? I think the spiritual practices that have come down through the ages are all designed to get us to touch on that inner self on a regular basis, whether it's meditation. In meditation, you leave your busy worldly mind. It's gone. Just shuts off. What's left is not the far country. Just put it that way. How about prayer? Especially the kind of prayer that we teach here, we call it treatment. Starts out with the presence. You're in the presence right away, which is what Jesus started out with. He said, go in the closet, close the door, Father, who's in secret is in there. Okay, so you start out with that presence. You're consciously being in that presence. Okay? And you share the things of your heart, the things of your mind with that presence, and you let it share with you, and so forth. There's a relationship being developed that is very alive, and each time you do this, it becomes more alive. Interestingly enough, he described this as a relationship to the Father, meaning he embodied the Father, this cosmic love, in a personal way. That was his advice. Make it personal. See it as a human being. Exactly the same thing that the Hindus said. But it's to be done regularly. It's not to be done after you get through with this worldly life, or when you just can't survive anymore and you're at the end of the rope. You can prevent a lot of that from happening just simply by doing it regularly. And I think that's the important thing about the story. It's a cyclic story and should be thought of that way. And let's go inside. Daily visit to the Father's house, so to speak. Or the Mother's house. If you were in the East, this would be Mother's house. So it doesn't matter, just embody this as you will, but get in there, just go in.
As you say, it's about the spiritual practice of mindfulness and constantly remembering, as you said about a friend of yours who was driving in a cab and almost got killed. He said, this too is God, and it was okay.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think, and maybe the end of the story is about the fact that the Father's celebration was actually the Buddhist sense of bliss. As he dropped into true divinity and sense of reconnecting, there was this bliss to celebrate.
Indeed. So thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to express this. And I think what's going to happen now is we'll do a treatment. How's that? Is that right? Is that what I'm supposed to do, folks? Somebody tell me.
Let's do a treatment.
Let's do a treatment. All right, let's take away the attention from facts. The Father's house is not made of facts. We're going to enter into a realm that you could call sublime. A realm that is unconditional in the sense that it doesn't depend on anything. The past, the future, the body, our opinions. All of this is irrelevant. The only thing that is important in this act is to be totally here now. To feel the now. We have more than just mind, we also have heart. We can feel ourselves being present. And to be willing to give up this world of the mind and the senses so that this feeling deepens, becomes rich. So that we discover that this now is the source of all there is and all there is to be. We have never been separated. We're not alone. The truth is, the far country was just a dream. He was always at home. We're always in the presence of that which created us, supports us, loves us, gives us everything we need, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, everywhere. The apparent distance is simply concocted by the mind. There is no distance. It's here now. Feel nowness moving through your nervous system. Present moment. Allowing the mind to give up its past and future. Feel the energy of now in your heart. You'll find that it's relaxation, peace, and love. You're never far from this. You can't be, because it's being you. Distance is an illusion, and we can give it up every single day. Let's release this, and so it is.
So it is.
And now we welcome